Dr. DeAndrea said I needed a mic, but all of you know differently. This could be dangerous. I like this. So welcome everybody and thanks for my coming over. We have an exciting hour ahead of us. The goal is for us to have a conversation in the next hour. And so I'm going to introduce a few important people in the room, and I'm going to do so very quite quickly so we can get into the work we need to. But first, Dr. Fran Vecchiola, our dean, is here. So if anyone has not met Fran, she's the dean of the School of, Social Work and Behavioral Sciences, a new school on campus, and she has been a wonderful support. To my left are two absolutely wonderful folks that I've had the pleasure, one I spend a fair amount of time with, and the other just the last couple of days we've had a chance to become acquainted. But Dr. Michael DeAndrea, who is the close to the newest faculty member in our department, but he's been around for a while and is a very well published and experienced leader in the field of multicultural and social justice counseling. And next to him is a friend of his, and he may have a few more words to say about Dr. Bill Parham, but I've spent the last day and a half with Dr. Parham, who comes with, as many of you have heard, a lot of accolades. He beyond being a full professor in counseling psychology, he works with the Players Association in a new model of developing or providing mental health services to the National Basketball Association, and is doing some really, really innovative work. And I have had the luxury of spending 2 days having a wonderful conversation and listening to him speak to students and other faculty. And I think the one thing that stands out the most to me is his essence as a counselor and recognizing that while he may be working with athletes, which is kind of a segue into Springfield College and his conversation later tonight, it will come out really clearly that he just values humans and human beings and the idea of human nature and has a wonderful and important critical lens as he looks at the impact of sport on humans. So we have a few questions to start, and then we're hoping that you all have some questions and that you can begin to engage in conversation with the three of us. So without further ado, Michael, would you like to go?
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for showing up. We're going to use the microphone and need to inform you and ask permission to record tonight. We will be using the recording to disseminate worldwide or in our classes or anywhere where people might be interested. If you're not interested in being recorded, step to the very back of the room or feel free to sit out in the lobby. But we have to inform people of that. So we appreciate you coming here. We have the diversity class. We have the human development class. But first of all, when Dr. Cumming McCann came in, I said, would you like to do a welcoming hearing? In about 30 seconds, she put together a warm welcome to everyone. She's the best, right? Let's give her a round of applause. If we look at our national treasury, we look and we see a number of jewels in our treasury. And one of them is sitting next to me. His name is Dr. William Parham. Dr. William Parham has an exalted career in sports psychology and is a strong advocate for counselors. He was the president of Division 17 Counseling Psychology at APA. When we look at our treasury, we see a shining diamond in that treasury, and that's really William Parham for the work he has and continues to do, not just in sports psychology, but weaving the thread of multiculturalism and social justice into sports psychology, unlike any other scholar, professor in the United States. We're honored to have him here tonight. A short introduction would recall that Dr. Parham got his bachelor's and master's degree in social ecology and human development at the University of California in Irvine. He went on to get his doctorate in counseling psychology at Southern Illinois University. For those of you in the diversity class, when you start looking up references, be sure to check out the number of pioneers in multicultural counseling movement and social justice who graduated from Southern Illinois University. They really represent other gems in our national treasury. Dr. Parham's practice not only includes being a professor at Marymount University in Los Angeles, but also includes working with the professional basketball team, the Los Angeles Lakers, for over a dozen years. He has really worked with elementary, middle, high school, and college students in sports psychology in different ways. He's never moved away from controversial issues, and we certainly see them emerging throughout sport, whether it's women's soccer, whether it's people taking a knee on the football field to stand up for justice, whether it's people who in the 1968 Olympics stood up strong to stand up for justice. For those in the human development class here in Springfield, we know that social injustices can have an adverse impact on healthy human development, and social justice makes us all better people in society. So it's an honor for me to introduce a colleague, a friend, a brother, beloved. Please give a warm Springfield College welcome to our speaker, Dr. William Parham.
Thank you for the welcome and the invitation, and I've known Dr. DeAndrea for quite some time, and the enthusiasm and passion that you see is really authentic and genuine, and so he is really the diamond up here as far as I'm concerned. He's really been in the game a long time, and so I think he's a very much added value to the university that's already doing a lot of distinguished work. So thank you for the invitation to stimulate conversation and maybe some controversy. But I also would like your commitment to really participate in this as a conversation. My style is not to talk at you, but to talk with you. And my style in my class is to call upon students that I know, and they know that I will call upon them. I won't execute that authority here, because I really don't want you to feel put on the spot, sort of. But I certainly invite you to feel comfortable enough to ask important questions, to disclose a personal journey as it is appropriate for what we will be discussing. So again, thank you for the invitation to participate, and let me get started.
Everyone has a program. We're going to deviate from the program and ask some of the questions that are down there, but we're going to begin by looking at the American culture. It's a complex and multidimensional phenomenon. This includes the evolution of sport culture in our society. So, Dr. Parham, from your broad-based experiences, would you comment on your own learning about the nature of sport culture in our country today?
Well, I think sports culture in our country is complex. It's long-standing. It's been recorded now. If you read the work by Arthur Ashe, a distinguished former athlete, now deceased, who's written a 3-part series where he chronicles African American athletes from 1600s to mid 1990s. In his chronicle called Hard Road to Glory. So sports as a venue, sports as a social justice venue has been around forever. There's been, what I've learned from that is that it provides ample opportunity for conversation. I think the narrative that has been spun is that sports, domestically and globally, has been the one area in the world that neutralizes all else, that people can forget where they came from, their issues, their struggles and challenges, and it unifies everybody on a common ground. I've begun to question that more vocally and in the writings that I do, because while I believe sports and athletics across sports, both men and women, we see a lot of value, a lot of life lessons that are learned, lessons that are taken way beyond sporting into one's life, throughout one's life, that are very fundamental cornerstone to your very existence and how you not only relate to yourself, but to others. The other thing that is also true in my reality is that sports really is a portal to a lot of what's not so correct in the world. When you look at race, when you look at gender, when you look at social class, there are opportunities to really roll up the curtain uncover the sheets, take off the mask of what really is there, that in truth is fueling the athletic excellence that you see in the various arenas across sports. So again, it's both two sides of the coin. On the one, there's a lot of positive, a lot of growth, a lot of intentionality, a lot of self-discipline. But the flip side of the coin is that there's an opportunity to recalibrate one's moral compass. And there's an opportunity a lot of people can take more advantage of what people do.
So one of the things we've spoken a fair amount about in the last couple of days is the way that kind of isms play out in sport. And I'm hoping that this is something that will begin to elicit some conversation in our class. We're in the throes of really discussing the impact of what whiteness is, and that would also mean exploring about race in complex ways. So how do you see issues of racism and sexism and transphobia and heterosexism, that's just the list play out in sport, maybe some specific examples, and then systemically, but also individually within athletes that you might work with?
I see it playing out, all of those isms, dramatically. But I want to take a step back. Racism, sexism, xenophobia, homophobia, fear about persons who are physically challenged, those are just part of the American culture, unfortunately. Sports is a microcosm of that. So, ergo, you will see that transmitted and translated in the world of sports. So sport is not an activity in an arena where that stuff does not emerge. In fact, it emerges powerfully. It's been emerging since the dawn of sports. It will continue to play itself out throughout the history of sports. And it's something that provides an opportunity. But when you look at, for example, women athletes are paid less than their male counterparts. Just take a look at women's soccer. They can take a look at that question within the field of soccer. And you look at Venus Williams and Serena and other distinguished women in basketball who are being paid less for winning the exact same crown that their male counterparts happen to have. When you look at the Colin Kaepernicks, it's no different than Tommy Smith and John Carlos did in the 1968 Olympics. It's no different than when Jesse Owens, track and field star, ran in front of Hitler based on his mentality of white supremacy. So culture, race plays itself out all the time. And with that comes the conversation of white privilege. White privilege plays itself out also. And it's important to really explore that simultaneously. Because when you really speak about white privilege, you really cannot speak about it honestly and earnestly and authentically without talking about those who don't have it. And when you, not only do they not have it, but there are systemic structures in place to almost ensure that they never do have it. And those are hard realities that you have to contend with, and it's even difficult for some of you in the audience to even hear you say that. And your discomfort is a healthy thing. The question isn't so much, are you uncomfortable? The question on the table is, what are you going to do with the discomfort that you are experiencing? And there's really only two answers to that. I'm going to sit on it and do nothing because that's what I've been doing. Or I'm going to get up and do something about it and make some different decisions, at least begin to think differently and enact some different behaviors consistent with now the new way that I now about this issue.
I'm going to follow up with a comment. So one of the powerful things that sat with me after our conversation last night was, and I think I was reading this in one of Zyron's articles about the term owner, right? And within the NBA, there are a lot of Black players primarily that are refusing to use the word owner because it conjures up ownership. I guess I don't need to explain that to you. Would you like to
explain it to someone in the audience?
Yeah. So that was like a powerful example. And so could you, I think maybe speak a little bit to that. And I think that, so one of the things that happens is that we'll go, oh my God, come on, like that's not what it means. the impact, because you're working in a counseling role with athletes who are kind of receiving a barrage from fans, from people that are their CEOs and their coaches. So kind of, could you speak a little bit to that?
Yes, I can. But certainly when you look at the NBA, and really what I want you to consider is that you're really not looking at the athletes. That's the image that you are looking at, and those are the folks who entertain you. But when you're really talking about the NBA, you're talking about the billionaire owners. You also look at the demographic profile of the league, most of which is African American. 20% now is actually international. There are a lot of persons of color who dominate the athletic scene. When you understand the history of race in America, when you understand slavery in America, there was the owner and the slave mentality. And there are many that argue that that is in fact the image that comes to mind nowadays when you use the word owner. I can, but will elect not to, share stories that illuminate quite clearly the point I'm wanting you to consider. So I would invite you just to trust that it has happened. I also want to say that the mentality that I'm suggesting exists does not exist in every owner, so I'm not trying to slam owners. I also want you to understand that all African American players and international players don't necessarily see or endorse this assertion that's been put forth by the media and the public. That being said, I think it is important to at least entertain the perception of it and the degree to which that influences a player's ability to play, his ability to feel he has some agency, meaning ownership, and ability to make some decisions about his career. That is a fundamental observation that needs to be thrown into the mix of conversation relative to an athlete's career. There's just no question about it.
Let's stay with the issue of racism for a little bit more, and then a question that's tied to sexism in your work now as the inaugurated first director of the National Basketball Association's innovative program entitled Mental Health and Wellness, which we congratulate you for having that position now and wish you nothing but good luck and much success. When we look at the issue of racism in society, we're all aware how quick someone is to pull the trigger and say, geez, you're really being racist when you do that. Hey, Dr. DeAndre, you're racist when you said that kind of thing. That seems to get a lot of notoriety. When we kind of look at in our diversity classes, there are 4 types of racism. One is overt, intentional racism. So that's the gentleman who wakes up in the morning and wants to do something cruel, mean, and disrespectful to a person of color. Overt, intentional. Then we have covert, unintentional. Covert, unintentional. So when we were sitting at dinner last night and you were describing the use of the word ownership and owners and its impact on the historic culture of slavery and the owners, I found myself, as I said to you then, I said, I never thought of that. And I must have referred to the owners numerous times, which is an act of covert, unintentional racism. So I want to thank you for bringing that to our attention. And that's what we need to do as a graduate and undergraduate forum for promoting healthy human development. Let me turn over a little bit, though, to your work in the director of mental health and wellness. Certainly, the concept of machismo is an important one that dominates the psyche of professional athletes almost across the board, perhaps across the board. And yet we know that the violence against women in our society is epidemic proportions. You gave some statistics, and might repeat them again. So underneath that, though, is something you're going to talk about later tonight at 7:30 in Fuller about the invisible tattoos. So there's something about machismo, the epidemic of violence against women, and the invisible tattoos that I'm curious about you elaborating, if you could take a little bit of time to do that.
Well, first and foremost, I want to add another concept that I'll elaborate on later on this afternoon. But how many of you in your places of residence right now have a smoke detector? Now, if you were to go right home right this minute, put your key in the door, open it, and your smoke detector was going off, I doubt very seriously that any of you could go to the step stool, take it down from the ceiling, and go get it fixed. You see, the fact that it went off suggests that it's working, not that it's not working. So when I see the explosion of domestic violence, when I see violence with alcohol and substance use, when I see aberrant behavior of any kind perpetrated by male athlete, female athlete, those issues are very distressing. They are problematic, and that problematic being defined that if they continue in those behaviors, a lot more consequences are going to result. But I go on record as saying, while something is problematic, it is absolutely, take it to the bank, never the problem. It's a smoke detector that something else is going on. And you may not have the time to really scratch anything but scratch the surface. But trust me when I say it's always a manifestation that there's something going on. So the question might become, what's in keeping a person from really being clear and saying what their distress? Well, the fact that you are male in this society, you simply and unequivocally don't have the same permission to emote as, for example, women are given. This example I cite in my clinical practice when I was practicing for 30 years. If I receive a female patient client who is depressed, who admits so, who, when I ask supporting past, whether it's her family or relationships, who support that notion. In my diagnostic assessment, according to DSM, I'm confirming that. And even if this person says, not only was I seen somewhere else, but I was on antidepressant medication, I'll ultimately say, well, Ms. Smith, sounds like depression is part of your profile. But Ms. Smith, now that I understand that, I'm going to have to ask you some additional questions. And I would then proceed to ask anger and rage assessment. Likewise, if I have this big, tall, 6'5", 200-pound guy come to me, and let's say he's referred by the court for anger management, and I do my assessment about his impulse control and all the other markers that you assess for anger. Once I get that profile, I'll say, okay, well, Mr. Smith, it's clear that this is part of your profile, but I also now need to spend more intentional time assessing sadness and depression. I did that because I've learned probably 20, 30 years ago, 80% of the women I've ever seen who were depressed, some of whom had been in treatment, including medication for depression, or ragefully angry. So the question is, why am I continuing to be depressed? Because you were never told that that wasn't the issue for which you were seeking treatment. You were not given societal permission or permission in your circle to say, I'm angry. But see, for a woman to walk in society, I'm angry, pounding her fists on tables, putting her fist to a wall, calling me all kind of MFs. The first thing out of everybody's mouth, including women, is that B's crazy. Totally discounting what you might be authentically feeling. Likewise, for this big, strong man, for him to walk around crying and looking sad all the time, that he's a punk and sissy and the other P word and effeminate and all these other things. And so, knowing that, yet knowing that you're also feeling some way very powerful, you have to reconcile, how do I say what I need to say in a way that's going to be heard? And so it does take you as keywords, and I use that very deliberately. In fact, I refuse to hear my students act just a counselor. You actually, if you understand the sacredness of the profession which you are entering, you are saving somebody's life. And part of that is understanding the message that they are communicating to you. See, because the other thing I tell my students, you are probably taught, not only in class, but in your communities, In fact, let me see a show of hands. How many of you think it's impossible to not communicate? So only a few of you. I want you to understand, at least, let me invite you to consider. It's not possible, not humanly possible, to not communicate. Doing nothing is communicating. So the question is, why aren't you talking? And that's what we're told when the client is not talking. Well, the better question is, what am I doing to not listen to the language and the language he or she is using to communicate to me? Maybe there's a deeper message in their silence. Maybe there's a message when I ask a tough question and they start gazing off to the side or curling their hair or shaking their leg. Maybe there's a message in the timing of that behavior that I need to pay attention to. So anyway, I say all that to say I think you just have to be very careful as you go down the road of race, class. You have to look at various contextual parameters, such as gender, class, race, history, social political context in America now is very different than it was prior to January 2017, for example. And those sorts of things are very powerfully important. The last thing I'll say is to Dr. DeAndrea's question. Someone says, you're a racist. In my worldview, race is always present. It is never not present. It may not always manifest itself, and it may not be always appropriate to bring it up. It is absolutely positively never not present. Nor is gender that's always present. All of those things are part of your fundamental identity. And you are communicating who you are, directly or indirectly, with the amalgamation of all those identities. There's just no way to not communicate all of it, whether you know it or not. That's enough.
I'm going to pause and see if there are any follow-up questions. I'm hoping there are from folks in the crowd. It could be anything. I mean, I know you're all dying to know. We don't talk about anything like that. But some of the common themes that Dr. Parham might have worked with, or other questions related to multicultural diversity counseling or anything.
And before we do that, what are you hearing you say, or what are you hearing in exchange of here? What's your vibe? What are you feeling right now? Some of you feel so moved to say something. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah. Something that I'm thinking a lot about is the call to accountability and the accountability of being white and needing to do my own work and dismantle my own white supremacy, and to name that and be continually acknowledging that in every single bit of work that I do.
I think that's wonderful. I would encourage you to add another thing. So the two most important abilities to have is not only accountability, but availability. To really be present in the moment, to understand what's really going on, not only within you, but outside of you. And so kudos for that, giving yourself permission to examine in that way. Any other reactions, feelings, thoughts, comments? And I know some of you are saying, oh, I'm not going to talk. But
You're like, I'm in church on Sunday morning.
that's right.
I appreciate being here and talking about your experience, but probably the one thing that struck me the most when you're talking about the moral compass. All these other isms and everything, to me, it's the moral compass. What happened to it? We should know that's not right to go. And also, when I come from a school background, what happened to standing up for what you believe in, boycotting it. We hear, oh no, we don't like that type of language. Who are these strong community leaders? I see more arguments going on the media networks than those strong civic leaders.
Well, I appreciate the question, and I certainly want to underscore the first part of your question, which is moral compass. I think that, for me, is the cornerstone value that we all need to examine. I think the moral compass is there, not everybody is calibrated, and opportunities to stand up, to be counted. As I've gone on record saying before, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. And those are missed opportunities where your moral compass doesn't get a chance to be recalibrated. So I think everybody has it, they don't use it quite effectively. I'm not quite sure that moral compass is the same as stand up and saying what you want to say. Because there are a lot of people who want to create a toxic environment by talking and validating and standing up for oppression, standing up for racism and sexism. That needs to be separated out from one's moral compass, because I think those two terms are talked about synonymously. But I also want to advance this for your consideration. As I have explored the notions of racism, as I have looked at oppression, as I have looked at the social expressions of all of that in terms of systems of homelessness, human trafficking, and so forth, I invite my students to ask the question, has America really failed in ending racism or homelessness or human trafficking? Or has America succeeded in keeping all of those social ills right where they are? I really believe the evidence supports the fact that America has not failed at all in eradicating those things. They have succeeded with the social structures and the way that they do run politics and create narrative to really maintain the status quo. You see, because when somebody says America has failed, at the extreme, your hope is that America will say, "Man, my bad, you're right, I need to then confess to it." Because then the mass of the population go, "Whew, finally, now we can get the work done." Well, see, the minute that exchange happens, the power structures sit back there laughing. Because now they're saying, now we got them thinking that they're going to make that difference. But I think it's fundamentally rooted in the notion that America's failed. America needs to say, we haven't failed, we've succeeded. So the only question ever on the table is, do we want to succeed differently? It's not possible, not humanly possible, to not succeed. I will pay the rest of your tuition and sign your diploma with whatever executive authority is given me today. If any of you can give me just one, not two, one example where you have failed at anything. I'm not saying you haven't felt that way. And I'm not saying you will say, I'll stand in line and tell you, hey, I failed all the time. I will show you, if I can talk with you about whatever failure you come up with in 2 or 3 minutes. Prove to you and take it to the bank confidence that you didn't fail at doing what it is you say you failed at. You succeeded at not doing it. I see some of you with big grins because you want that tuition to get paid. I just wanted to get your attention. Where I'm going with this is I think it's important to change the narrative of success failure. See, when you feel like a failure, then you have to prove that you're worth. I just think you need to examine that. I think you have an inherent worth. As I mentioned in an earlier presentation, how many of you have fingerprints on your fingers? So my guess is all of you. And how many of you have just one of your 10 fingerprints? Just one. That's identical to anybody on planet Earth. See, the answer is, when you were born, the mold was broken. It's an absolute fact. There's nobody like you, nobody can be like you, and you can't be like anybody else, as evidenced by your fingerprints. That's a unique, spiritually centered gift that you have been given. And your goal in life is to discover the genius that you are innately blessed with. As healers, as men, as women, as husbands, as daughters, sons, really discovering who you are and what your purpose in life is all about.
That sort of segues into what you just said. And I would ask, you mentioned something about the sacredness of the profession. You just talked about healing, but can you talk more about this issue of saving one's life? And I think people enter into the field of wanting to do good, want to help others, but can you also talk about in saving lives or wanting to make the world better, the importance of being equipped and having awareness?
I think being equipped and being aware are important. In fact, I would up the ante and say they're critical. I think you have to have a skill set. I think you have to have an awareness of what is going on in the first place and the contextual parameters within which a person survives in order to get a full makeup profile of what's really happening. But I go on record as saying something that I know my colleagues have resisted, not my colleagues here. But I and all of you are now being trained as you are the wizard. You get these degrees, these diplomas, these certificates, a sign that you are now credentialed to do whatever you do. And patients come to you as if you are the wizard, and you then have to get them better. How many of you have ever been in a one-way counseling situation when you were observed? Anybody get nervous about that? Well, that happens all the time. And where I'm going with this is one of the things I invite my students, and I teach several classes, one of which is basic counseling to graduate students who are earning a master's degree in counseling. They, at some point, have to memorize 12 mantras, one of which is, when I listen to my clients long enough, they will tell me what's wrong with them. When I listen to them just a little bit longer, they will tell me what I can do to make them feel better. See, the real therapist in the room is not you. The real therapist in the room is the patient. Somebody 30, 40 years old come to you, before they open their mouth and say the first word, you know that what you're looking at is 30 years of success without you. It's clear that they are now coming to you because they are in various stages of brokenness, and you have been identified as a healer who can facilitate them getting back on track. And that's a blessing and a gift. But a lot of the pressure you feel, and you will feel, is that you feel you have to fix them. That is American arrogance personified. At best, if you get all A's in your counseling classes, you get 100% on the licensing exam, you get an award by the governor and whoever is in leadership here, that you are the best counselor ever. At best, you're only a facilitator of somebody discovering the innate genius and talent that they have, and how can they get back on track? You're a facilitator. So I think it is important to have some skills and awareness. But that which you really need to be aware of is how to facilitate others discovering the skills they already possess and the awareness that they already have that are clouded, conceived. That's the real role of a healer.
Hi. So I just, throughout listening to you speak, I was thinking about like every Sunday sitting watching football with either my dad or with fellow peers and such, and about how whether it was the kneeling during the national anthem, and about, my father, for instance, came from a very conservative background, some of my friends. But like, do you have any advice, or what's the best ways to facilitate such conversations, not with a client, but with peers or family who maybe didn't come from like working at a college or my background, where I'm surrounded with like-minded people, but who were surrounded with different ideas, and how to best engage in those conversations, even when watching football, when stuff gets presented, to have such conversations about race and racism and such.
I always encourage people to master the art of listening. Because when somebody who's not been trained, as you say, or is in your circle of influence yet, has sort of a more traditional way or older way or not current way of looking at the world, I don't know that I would encourage you to jump in and want to rescue them and right the ship right then and there. I simply encourage you to listen to what are they really saying, what are they really communicating. I suspect if you listen carefully, and one of my elders taught us that we are given 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, because we are to listen twice as much as we are to speak. That the comments that are made relative to what you're talking about are not really about race. It's about the person's inadequacy, the person feeling the sense that there's some out of controlness at some level going on in their life, and they need to verbalize the power that they think they have. I think there's some other hidden messages that are going on. So my advice is to really engage in the art of listening. Because when you listen, that's when you're really going to understand. I further invite my students, as other presentations I did today, if all of you were to write out the word listen, L-I-S-T-E-N, and I asked you, what does that mean to you? I'm sure I would get a different answer, but a lot of overlapping answers from all of you. But if I then were to say, invite you to consider that the key to doing maximally what this word spells, that the key is hidden in those 6 letters. You might scratch your head and go, If you put those 6 letters in front of you and move them around, you'll come up with the word silent. So the best way to listen is to be silent, positioning yourself to absorb the cognitive, the behavioral, the emotional, or affective messages that can't help but being communicated, even in exchanges like that. And so resist the urge to think it's a race issue. Embrace the strength to listen. Plant a seed here and there, knowing that you're not going to right the ship then, but by the end of the season, I guess you're going to see a fundamental shift in his attitude. Almost guaranteed. The quickest way to get somewhere is to slow down, not to speed up. So you don't have to correct anything like that.
I just want to add a comment. First of all, I want to thank all the folks that are asking questions. It's really helpful and continue. We're getting towards the close of our meeting, but I want to keep it on. I do want to put into perspective, since Dr. Parham is a noted author, a lot of the things he does has to do with research. He, like me, like others, are social scientists, and we kind of look at an accurate interpretation of reality. So I do understand the importance of the moral compass and the dealing with family members who are stuck somewhere with a power situation going on here. But I would ask students and I ask colleagues to look at more accurately, not microscopically, at those incidences that gain our attention through the media. The leader of the highest level of government in the United States calling out this and that and going on. We kind of focus attention there. I'd ask simply for a more accurate understanding. And it goes something like this. If we count up the people that are dealing with domestic violence in our communities, if we count up the number of people across the country dealing with homelessness, if we count up the number of people dealing with racism in society, it was 1951, I think the last lynching was, in the United States. If we look at what's going on with the environment, if we look at the next generation, the genius, the moral compass of the youth in the United States who rally millions, not hundreds, millions of people on the climate catastrophe that's going on. All I'm asking for is equal time for a sober analysis of what's going on. If we look at people like Dr. William Parham and the impact he's having, not on hundreds, not on thousands, but tens of thousands of people in high athletic positions in the last 30 years, if we look at all those people and take a magic wand and they disappear tomorrow, what state would we be in? Yes, we need more moral development. People more in our human development class, we're going to focus in on moral development strategies. But do me a favor, let's be accurate in our understanding and not just overweigh the deficits in our society. Yes, they're mounting challenges, but as Noam Chomsky repeats in his writings, it's a lot better than it was 50 years ago, and we're in a regressive stage. Now, what I'm asking people to think of is, what are you going to do as you leave this presentation tonight? What have you heard that will move you, inspire you to do 5% more on one thing? That's the essence of education. It's not how much knowledge you've acquired, but how you're going to utilize that knowledge to make a better world. So at some point, it would be good to hear from our students and colleagues here tonight. What are you going to leave this with? What are you going to do?
The invitation is out there, yes.
I'm wondering, sorry. So for me, I spend most of my time working with children. I'm wondering, in your opinions, like what the best way to address social justice concerns. A lot of students will bring it up. Like for instance, I work doing outpatient therapy in Westfield, and there was just a murder that had some racial undertones to it, so that's going to be something that I'll be dealing with, I'm sure, very soon. So, any words of advice? So, because I know parents also are very sometimes set in their ways as well. So, as the professional, I don't want to overstep the family boundaries while also being as open and honest as possible.
Well, again, I think there's 3 or 4 things that come to my mind, and I'll certainly have my colleagues respond. I think it's important, one, to not run from the issue, but to acknowledge it. I think it's important, secondly, as you acknowledge it, to be careful about saying, hey, I understand what you're feeling. Whoa, you don't. I think it's more appropriate to say, I can't even begin to imagine what you're feeling, but I would like to know. And I'm available to hear when you feel comfortable sharing. That gives them a decision to participate. Thirdly, I think if there are kids, depending on age, that are showing signs of distress, mostly acted out in behavior, I think it's important to teach them some new strategies that you cannot treat a child, certainly not a single-digit age child, without also bringing their guardian, whether it's parent or non-parent guardian, into the mix. Because a lot of the behavioral problems that I've ever seen are not rooted in the genetics of the kid. They're not just all of a sudden acting weird. There's always a smoke detector. There's something else that's going on. And lastly, I would encourage you to be aware of your gender and your ethnicity and the stimulus value that may or may not be having in the situation. Because you may, in your own skin and mind and spirit, be very authentically wanting to be available. And I don't think that that's ever up for debate. But your willingness and authenticity to be available doesn't necessarily translate to people receiving it that way. The same token, don't be off-put by somebody saying, oh, you don't know, you're this, whatever, you don't really get it. Don't go, okay, I'll back up. I think it's important to consider, do I want to back up? Or do I want to interpret that response as their self-protection? As their way of putting out a trial balloon to see if I'm really going to be there, if they really tell me what's on their mind. In other words, do you really, really want to hear what people say? A lot of counselors that don't. And I think if you examine those 4 areas, I think that will situate you in the long run, in the short run, to make sense.
When you ask about suggestions for dealing with kids, colleagues and I have published 4 different articles focusing in on preventing prejudice in the elementary school. We had 16 weeks that we had repeated it at 3 different schools, 3rd, 5th, 7th grade. We used social skills, standardized instrument to look at different types of social skills. We found out that after 16 weeks, there was an increased level of effective and appropriate cooperation, empathic communication, and cooperation with students. We had very, very playful, very fun activities. I'm going to make sure that you get a copy of that. You know, you might want to replicate it in some ways, and I'm certainly going to make it available to all our students because I want to replicate it again here in Springfield, Massachusetts, and see how it goes. Preventing prejudice. And then we go across the board: racism, sexism, homophobia, classism, and that kind of stuff. How can we increase, an expanded way of thinking morally?
And the last thing I would say is just kids know, right? And so the one thing you said is listen, kids are going to tell you what they need. And as adults, we water things down. By the age of 3, kids not only recognize race and class differences, but they recognize power differences based on that. And so adults are oftentimes minimizing their lived experience, regardless if they're part of the dominant or marginalized group. And when we do that, we're dismissing this experience that they're having and what they're naming. And so I think it's being able to sit in that, as both these folks said, and acknowledging they know, no matter how much we try to convince them otherwise, they know, and we don't want to mess that up, right? So listen.
I think we're approaching the end. I want to thank everyone here and also make a little bit of a challenge. Thank you all for coming here tonight from your classes. Thanks for my colleagues for inviting the classes to come here. I hope we can build this in the class. But let me kind of invite you with the inspiration that we received. Dean Fran and our new colleague, Dr. Edwards, and the rest of us here, Allison and Thomas, William Parham, and myself, we're committed to changing the world. We are committed to changing the world, and as you can see from tonight's presentation, at the highest level of athletics in this country, Dr. Parham is helping to change the world. We want to challenge you to join us and prepare yourself to help change this world and build on the strengths and the moral core that we have at the center, to attend presentations like this, to join with our colleagues in social work and human services and psychology, bonded together to change the world. There's no question in our mind, any one of the faculty or Dr. Parham, we need to change the world, we are changing the world, and we need your help. Please leave here tonight with making a commitment to join on board to help change the world. Thank you very much. Do you have any closing comments?
No, again, I just want to thank you for the warm welcome that I have received here in Springfield. I certainly want you to really take what I've invited you to consider and what all of my colleagues have invited you to consider, that you are healers in the best sense of the word. It's no accident that you are in this program at this particular point in time in your life. I know it feels like you have chosen the job, but one could argue, as I might, that the job and the career is choosing you. So the question is, how open are you going to be being pulled into doing work that's much needed? And that's going to take honest self-reflection. And I'll leave you with one of the things I mentioned earlier, a mantra. Again, I invite my students to memorize 12 mantras. I also invite them to say that the goal of memorizing is not to recall, is not to repeat, is not to regurgitate. The goal of memorizing is to forget. Forget meaning get so deeply ingrained in your spirit, you don't give it a second thought. So one of the 12 mantras that they memorize, in addition to what I mentioned earlier, is a person will never see their reflection in running water. It is only when the water is still will their reflected image begin to emerge. So as you leave out of here today and go on your continuing your life's journey, I would encourage you to really embrace moments of reflection, honest self-reflection. being still, because the answers that you seek about your career, or what's my value, what's my purpose, I'm telling you, it is not outside of you. Don't be like Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz. She wanted to get back to Kansas, and the wizard told her, the wizard, if you click your heels 3 times, you'll go back home. She, in fact, woke up in her bed in Kansas. But that's not the moral of the story. See, the moral of the story of the Wizard of Oz is you don't have to go outside of yourself down some yellow brick road journey to find the brains, heart, and courage that you already have inside. So going home for Dorothy was not going to Kansas, it's going in here. And that's where the answers that you seek about your purpose and intention in life is where you will find the answers. So thank you. And again, thank you for the invitation and for your participation in today's discussion. And go forward. And whatever you do next.
Thank you, Dr. Parham.